Local programming on KRWG Public Media made possible in part by viewers like you. Thank you.
Welcome to Your Legislators. I'm your host, Jonny Coker. Joining me to talk about the ongoing legislative work in New Mexico's capital is Representative for New Mexico's 39th District, Representative Luis Terrazas. Representative, thanks so much for joining us today.
Good morning, Jonny.
Yeah, morning. And I just wanted to get right into it. House Bill 417 is making its way through one of the committees that you sit on. That's the House Taxation and Revenue Committee. Of course, the bill would raise the alcohol tax in the state as well as change how that money is distributed. And you voted against this bill in committee. So I just wanted to start this interview off by laying it out for you and asking why did you vote against this bill?
Well, I voted against this bill because, first of all, let me go back a little bit and tell you the legislature has had a $3.6 billion surplus. Okay? And so I'm shocked that we are raising taxes on consumers, because at the end of the day, the alcohol tax is going to go through restaurants, it's going to go through our grocery stores, it's going to go through our convenience stores. And, it was at 6%. On, several reasons that I voted against it. First of all, it is on the tail end of the sale. So it's a point of sale increase, which makes it complicated. It makes it complicated for those people who have a bar and maybe a package liquor. How do you know what, there's a lot of point of sale issues there. Bit complicated. But beyond that, I have ran my whole entire career as being a legislator as not raising taxes. So the burdens on restaurants and these small businesses, grocery stores. I mean, I know it's alcohol, but at the same time, it's raising costs on all of these businesses. And at the end of the day, it's costing consumers more money.
And of course, this piece of legislation would make it to where, it would raise the tax as well as put that money into a separate fund from the general fund into an alcohol alleviation fund. I was wondering, even with the absence of raising taxes, would you be willing to take the current taxes from alcohol and put them into an alleviation fund or something like that?
Yes, that would be something I'd be interested in. But I don't, here's the thing is we already have a tax structure. This was creating a whole new tax structure that was going to complicate the system. My understanding is in the first, the tax that we currently have addresses about 12 suppliers. And so it's done on the front end. It's a little easier for them to keep control of. The system's already set up. Whereas this new bill that we were talking about, 417, would have increased taxes, number one, which I'm against. But worse, it would have been at the tail end, which means that all these restaurants would have had to not only pay, collect the tax, but they'd have to get a new point of sale system. The Tax and Revenue Department would have way more work to do to follow up with all these filers. I can't remember the amount of impact that they would have, but it was huge in the number of taxpayers.
And I've spoken to a few sponsors of this legislation, including Representative Ferrari and Representative Lara Cadena. They feel that an alcohol harm alleviation fund would essentially, help the state reduce the cost of alcohol-related death and other alcohol-related harm, caused within the state, especially with New Mexico, having one of the highest rates of alcohol-related death and alcohol-related driving death in the entire country. When you talk to legislators that are for this tax increase, what are those conversations like, and what is your response to them, when it comes to that argument that they put forward that this would reduce, the cost to society?
Well, first of all, I'm going to say if we could solve this by just redirecting the funds that we're receiving now, okay? So we could go ahead and redirect those and address some of the issues that they have. Some of the issues that we do have in this is that this legislation, if passed, would not affect any of the reservation areas, right? They're sovereign nations, and so those are some of the areas that we're having also issues, and it does affect our stats. What I am seeing is another huge issue, and I'm gonna talk about this because this is important. Is as a person that works in the funeral business, we're seeing more people die of fentanyl than any other thing. So although this is a very important thing, and I'm very much in support of redirecting that fund to address alcoholism, and and hopefully diverting young individuals and young adults from not doing this, we have another issue that's fentanyl, and they're moving into drugs and other things that is also an issue.
Mm. And I definitely do want to talk about drugs and public safety a little later. And this will be my last question as it relates to the alcohol tax. And this is just theoretical. Would you be in favor of moving taxes from the oil and gas industry from the general fund into some sort of alleviation fund? I know that's not necessarily on the table, but are those conversations you're willing to have with other legislators?
I'm open always to any conversations that take place to make public safety a priority. But that's a hypothetical that I would have to read a bill that, and I'm not going to agree to something that's just hypothetical. But I would say in general, I absolutely would address something that would help public safety.
Mm. And speaking of public safety, of course, earlier this session, you voted in favor of House Bill 8, the massive public safety package that would have far-reaching implications, including giving prosecutors more options to involuntarily commit people into psychiatric facilities, as well as raising penalties for fentanyl distribution. So how's this bill going to affect everyday New Mexicans, in your opinion?
Well, I think look, here's the thing. House Bill 8 is a small step in the right direction. I don't believe that it had all of the things that would address the crime epidemic that we have in New Mexico. When you have law enforcement, DAs, victims' families and stuff like that coming forward, and they're disappointed in the result of House Bill 8 not having enough teeth. It is sad. It didn't address the juvenile issue that we're having, the most violent crimes that are being committed by juveniles. My understanding from some of the DAs, they laugh at them, literally commit these crimes and laugh at them because they know that nothing's going to happen to them. And unfortunately, in Doña Ana, Chair Ferrari, who rolled HB 134, which was put by Representative Reeb, a former DA. She put that in there to try to address this, had brought everybody to the table, including Mr. Bregman over in Albuquerque. Law enforcement had a lot of conversations. It was vetted through the interim, and it was rolled in committee and wasn't heard till last week, and then it was killed in committee. That was going to address the real issue that we have. Back to what you said, the competency issue, that's only 4% of the crimes, according to my conversation with the DA. The most violent crimes of these juveniles that are, committing previous crimes, whether it's drive-bys or murders or whatever that is affecting our communities, isn't being addressed. And it's really a disappointment. Then we see a bill, I'm going to pivot to Saturday's bill, HB 255, where on the floor, they ended up branding it the homicide scholarship bill, because they were giving $2,000 cost of living funding for the most violent offenders when they get out, and then still giving them the opportunity scholarship, yet never addressing how the family of the victim's family, does that victim's family get anything? Does that child, that if someone's murdered, does anyone in their family get any sort of a compensation? things are, you can't make this stuff up. It's strange that we're, instead of holding these juvenile criminals accountable and giving the tools that our DAs, our law enforcement, and families of victims are asking for, we're pivoting and almost giving encourage. I don't want to use word encouragement, but a bonus. I don't know, a $2,000 bonus after you get out. I just find those things strange, and you can't even make this stuff up here in the roundhouse. I think where we're at. Go ahead, John. I was just going to say, Johnny, sometimes my personal opinion is when New Mexicans are crying for the governor, New Mexicans, and some of us in the legislature are everybody in the legislature is being asked by New Mexico to address crime, and the majority is not doing that, and they're pivoting and just giving us little bits and pieces of it. It is very, very frustrating. And sometimes, I was talking to my family the other day. Even though we're here to represent New Mexicans, sometimes we need you. We need our New Mexicans to come up here, show themselves in presence here in the roundhouse, and show that they're disappointed with the direction that this legislature is going, and hold the people that they voted in accountable in following what they need. They want help and safety.
Well, back to House Bill 8, obviously you voted in favor of it, and you're saying there's not enough teeth to it. What would you like to see implemented in, the next public safety package, or something moving forward that you feel could
House Bill
address
134 should have been implemented into HB 8. They should have adopted all of what was on HB 134. That would have been applicable because we're going to run out of time here. But I'm going to say, if you look up HB 134, it addresses the juvenile aspect and a few other things that I think were important that we're missing out of that legislation.
And, you're saying that the bill doesn't have enough teeth, but also, there are some organizations, including the ACLU of New Mexico, along with a number of other nonprofits. I'll just go ahead and read you a quote regarding that House bill. Quote, "This so-called public safety package is not going to achieve actual safety. It will only create new crimes, lengthen sentences, and use the criminal legal system to force people into psychiatric facilities that have yet to be built." So, what is your response to that?
To HB 8?
Yes.
Yeah, here's the thing. I agree it's not enough. They're agreeing with me it's not enough. We needed HB 134 to be, that should have been part of the entire package. So I'm agreeing with them. But why did I vote for it? Because I'm like, we have to do a little something rather than nothing. So, here's the thing. I had a choice at that moment. Do I move in a small direction, or do I reject all of it because I didn't get anything? Because the New Mexicans didn't get anything. So the choice for me at that moment when I looked at it, I said, it's a little something. It may have not been all the tools that the DA and the law enforcement wanted, but that's the bill I had to vote on. If I had it my way, it would have been HB 134 with that, and it would have built a bigger, stronger, more robust safety package than what we had, public safety package. But that was what I had to vote on.
And with House Bill 8 passing, through the legislature, New Mexico already has quite a strain on mental health resources. How do you feel about the state expanding its competency evaluations and assisted outpatient treatment programs? I know within the budget, there's about, $100 million for transitional housing and behavioral health initiatives. How do you feel about that? Do you think there's enough being done in terms of expanding the state's mental health care?
We are way behind on that. And it's evident because ever since I've been up here, that's all we've talked about. And you can see it just, as a regular New Mexican driving through the streets of Albuquerque or a small town in Silver City or going to Las Cruces or Santa Fe, you see the mental health issues that we have. And that is connected with drug abuse, fentanyl abuse, and the drugs and mental health go hand in hand. We got a drug problem in New Mexico that needs to be addressed. And, I think from what I understand is that the border seems to be closed now. And so that's going to dry up. But what scares me is they're going to pivot to a new drug. And so we just have to work on finding ways to support our youth. I tell this story when I was in tobacco and stuff. I don't smoke. I don't do any of that stuff. But I remember having a school program where they came and they talked to us about that. Talked to us about brushing our teeth and how to use a toothbrush, and it was done every year, and they talked to us about smoking. And I'm talking about smoking, period. Not just tobacco. For me, smoking is smoking is smoking. So cannabis and all of it. I think that if we want a healthy society, we teach our youth that it's not good for them. Vaping's not good for them. Smoking is not good for them. Drinking's not good for them. And health and safety all together to live a good, clean life. And nothing's perfect, but we can start planting those seeds. Hopefully that'll give benefits later on. I mean, I remember I was probably 5 years old and I talked to my dad. My dad was in Vietnam, came back smoking cigarettes. And I remember asking my dad, they told us in school, this will cause cancer and kill you. My dad stopped smoking. So, I mean, it's incredible. And my dad, maybe my mom and dad had that conversation. I don't know. I know that through that program, I was able to tell my dad that it wasn't good, and it made me feel uncomfortable. And he did it for us. So, those things pay dividends in the end if we just work on them when they're young. That's what I think, sir.
And speaking of the state's youth and lack of economic opportunity, especially in rural areas of the state like the one that you represent, what are some things that you feel the state legislature could be working toward in terms of creating more economic opportunity and more reasons for youth to stay in the state and have jobs lined up for a bright future?
Well, what I'm going to tell you, Jonny, is this state has not been fair to businesses. And so when you are projecting things like they did in this session and past sessions, where you're basically pushing the largest tax increase in New Mexico history through paid family medical leave, when you're forcing individuals, both workers and employers, to be taxed and to address 5% of the needs, but 95% of the people are being taxed. Before they get their paycheck, it's being removed. There are people that don't necessarily want it because they're living paycheck to paycheck, and they need every penny that they have. When you're seeing things like that, when you're seeing I'm going to call them business bills that stifle the investment in new business and expanding businesses here in New Mexico, when we don't ask our graduates from colleges after New Mexicans have paid for their education through the Opportunity Scholarship or the lottery scholarship to fund their school, to just ask them, have a program to stay behind 2 years and give back to the New Mexicans that paid for their school. Well, we don't do those things. That's hurting us. We're lacking nurses, but yet we have nursing programs and they're just leaving the state. We have wonderful engineering programs. We have really neat things in New Mexico, but we're not keeping our kids here because we're not following through in ways to incentivize them or say, look, we're willing to pay for your education. Give New Mexico 2 years of your time, of your life to say thank you, and we forgive all that. Right now, all we're doing is giving. We're educating our youth to leave the state and find better opportunity, and it is unfortunate. We have a housing crisis. Why do we have a housing crisis? We just saw legislation. Well, we saw legislation that failed, and I can't remember which session, on forcing higher standards because of this green energy, situation. And everybody wants efficiency, but kids can't afford a house now. They can't afford it. And we're going to find ourselves like other states, like Hawaii, where kids can't afford to have their own home, and they end up living with parents because they don't have a choice. I think we need to help with supply and demand issues when it comes to housing. We need to address situations like mobile home and manufactured homes. I hear from constituents that they're frustrated. They'll buy a manufactured home, which is we consider affordable housing. Yet it takes 4 to 6 months to get the inspection done for them to move in. So imagine if you're barely strapped, and this is your dream to at least have your own space, and you're not renting, and so you go and you buy this manufactured home, and you have to make 4 or 5 payments before inspection's done, and still pay for your rent at the same time. It's not good for moving in the direction of affordable housing for our youth. It's scary, and I think we continue moving in that direction. We're literally losing all of the opportunity for our children to get housing to people that are retiring, let's just say out of California, selling a $2 million home that's maybe only a 2,000 square foot house over there, or whatever the numbers are, selling their home, coming over here and buying something for $400,000 and our kids that are graduating can't compete. Right. I know it firsthand. I've got a daughter that just moved back from Japan, and she's in the Air Force, and purchasing a home is very, very difficult. And if it wasn't for my wife and I helping, it'd be very difficult for her to purchase a home.
And Representative, you mentioned some of the brain drain happening within the state. Obviously, kids come get educated in New Mexico, or folks from New Mexico get educated in New Mexico, and then go elsewhere for opportunities. And something you brought up was paid family medical leave. Do you think that, and I know you voted against paid family medical leave, but what's your response to folks that might say, like, paid family medical leave is a reason to stay in the state, it's an investment in the workers, so to speak?
I'm going to tell you this, the vast majority of legislators here have never made payroll. They don't understand what it takes to hire and retain workers. And they're telling us, people that have businesses, that know how to retain our workers. I have employees, and I call them family. They're my working family. And many small businessmen and women across the state are just like us. That's our family. We spend a lot of time with them. We cannot make it without them. Okay. And so I'm going to give you an example of what was really going on in New Mexico with small businesses. Last year, I had an employee. She's 72 years old. And needed some medical treatment. She was gone 3 months. I fully paid her, and I took care of her the entire time, and because she's a wonderful employee. And I found the best fit I could to try and not replace her, but replace her while she's gone. And it was difficult to get. And just when I'm kind of getting her going, it's time for, then that person came back to work. I have many employees that have worked for me 15, 18 years, 20 years. So, we are working, and we, as a good businessman, in the environment that we have here in New Mexico, where labor participation rates are horrible, where it's fine to find workers. A businessman that isn't taking care of their employees is going to lose them to another one that's going to appreciate them. And so, although they're saying this is the right way to go, I will absolutely disagree, and I'll tell you why. The bill that was presented before us has no actuarial work. I believe that it's a bill. So imagine they're not giving us the work, the actuarial work, a scientific study to tell us if this fund will meet the needs of New Mexicans and still be solvent and without raising taxes. I can assure you they're going to raise taxes even more. And keep in mind, this is not optional. This is mandatory. Mandatory. The legislature is mandating every New Mexican that works for a business that has 5 or more employees to mandatorily give of their paycheck before they even get it. We don't know the situations of many people. Some of them are just struggling to pay rent or their utilities or food on their table or gas. Kind of like in my town, when I there for a while, I'd go to the gas pump and I'd see $10 on multiple gas pumps. What is that telling you? They're rationing gas. They're struggling. People are struggling. This is going to then also be, unfortunately, when we raise the cost on businesses and employees, that gets passed again on to the consumer, creating more inflation. We had a bill that substituted that on the floor, and that bill was would have been paid out of the early childhood the early child care department education fund, and would have been paid for without raising taxes, and it would have been a step in the right direction. I supported it all the way. It would have, and if individuals wanted to expand the coverage, they could have optionally, the employee could have optionally decided to participate. That's what we have to do. We cannot mandate workers to be giving up their part of their paycheck that when they're struggling with inflation rates of what we've been seeing the last few years, and saying, by the way, it's going to help only 5% of the workers. Agriculture workers, they're going to pay. They work on average in a year 150 days. And the legislation that was passed through paid family medical leave, let's say rebranded with a different name, requires you to work 6 months. Well, guess what? Agricultural workers only work 150 days. They don't work the 180 days. So if that doesn't happen, they can't even take advantage yet. They're required to pay. So you can kind of see what happens when we vet these things. You can see we've been having this conversation for several years. Why haven't they given us an actuarial study so that we can actually vote on something with some data rather than blind and hoping that it doesn't raise taxes? It's projected to increase to $800 million is what I've been hearing. And so that means taxes are going to go up somewhere, some way. It's going to get paid for.
Well, Representative, there's a lot to continue to discuss, but unfortunately we are out of time. But I want to thank you for coming on the show today. We always appreciate you giving us the time.
Jonny, you've been great. Thank you very much. Say hi to Anthony for me, and I know it's hard to capture a lot of the information or a lot of the things that are going on up here in the legislature in 26 minutes. So thank you for the time.
And that's all for today's episode. We'll be back next week to continue our coverage of New Mexico's legislative session. If you have questions you'd like me to ask lawmakers, you can submit those questions to feedback@nmsu.edu. In the meantime, you can stay up to date on the latest local news at krwg.org. For all of us here at KRWG Public Media, I'm Jonny Coker, and we'll see you next week for another episode of Your Legislators.